This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Of the pod, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome a person who I've been trying to get on to this pod, I think for over a year now in total, and we've finally been able to make our calendars match up. Mr. Matthew HYLAND from Ultra Commerce. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here, and I'm glad we found the time that we can connect. Looking forward to the discussion.
Me too. And listen, you've got the amazing Aussie accent going on, and I always, as somebody who spent 28 plus years living in New Zealand and traveling heavily between New Zealand and Australia, and really cutting my teeth in the entire e-commerce industry from New Zealand, it's always nice to have the Antipodean accent on the podcast.
Yeah, you'll probably pick up, and I'm sure your audience will pick up. There's an English side to the accent as well.
Yes.
Originally from the UK, and then been in Australia now nearly 25 plus years. You'll pick up a bit of a combination of accents here. But
yeah, I know. I always tell people that I'm at war with myself. Sometimes they say, where are you from? What's that accent? And sometimes the Kiwi twang comes through, especially when I've been in New Zealand, like I was last month for 3 weeks. Kiwi accent starts to poke its way through, and especially some of the nomenclature and some of the words that we use to refer to things is such an interesting thing, how New Zealand and Australia have developed their own vibe and their own way of seeing the world. And it's very cool to have you on the pod, and you're in the beautiful city of Sydney, right?
I'm in Sydney at the moment, which is a beautiful time of year to be in Sydney. For any of your audience who, I'm sure many of you have come down here, but it's a wonderful city to be based, to live. And I do spend quite a bit of time on the road, so I'm fortunate enough to be back in Sydney at the moment. Yeah, so it's great.
I love it. Listen, we do want to talk to you about Ultra and all the special things about what make Ultra Commerce, the platform, unique and special. But if we were to go back before that, how did you come to be in this industry? Because if I was to look back at your history, is primarily you had a huge career in telecommunications long before you ever got into e-commerce. But then you also have held commercial roles, operational roles. You're clearly financially savvy. So what drew you to the world of e-commerce in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question. I regularly get asked, how did you get here? How did you land in Ultra Commerce? Why? How did it all occur? So my background is a business background, as you rightly say, across telco, media, technology companies. Studied in the UK at British Telecom. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. Studied in the UK at British Telecom, head of finance and operations for a big division very early in my career. Got pretty senior pretty quickly. Came out to Australia, worked for a couple of the large telcos here in different operational roles. Then made a move to media, where I was the COO of Fox Sports here in Australia for nearly 5 years. In Fox Sports, I ran all the technology areas, the broadcast operations, built the new broadcast centres for Fox Sports here in Australia, in Sydney and in Melbourne. So probably the most enjoyable role I've ever had, and the broadest role I ever had. After Fox, went into a more technology role in working for Ontario Teachers, actually. They bought a business down here in Australia. They appointed me as their guy on the ground here. So for a few years, worked for them, looking after an asset here in Australia. And that leads to why Ultra Commerce. Having worked in big corporates, having worked in big public companies and bigger private companies, I always had a desire to build a company from the ground up. Take all the experience that I'd gained over many years in bigger organizations and use all that experience to build a company from the ground up. I got introduced to a business called UltraServe. I don't know if you ever heard of UltraServe.
No.
About 10 years ago, they were a private cloud hosting, very small business, about 10 people, based just north of Sydney on the central coast of New South Wales. They were the first private cloud hosting business here in Australia and had started to host a lot of the retailers in the cloud. So they'd built up a lot of experience around what it took to really manage a retail workload in a cloud setting. So they had that DNA that they'd started to build. I got introduced to the business. The founder was just leaving, and the business needed to be re-energized, reorientated. So I came in and thought, I'll take this business and build it into something that that we can really make global, really make a meaningful business. Pivoted the business quite hard into e-commerce, and the rest is history. We've really built up. But it was really that desire to go into build a business from the ground up, or go into a business that's pretty much starting and then build it. I've got to say, and I'm sure you hear this from many of your guests, when you're looking from the outside in and you're looking at people building businesses, it looks a lot easier from the outside than it is doing it from the inside. And that's the headline I give to people when they ask me, how did you find it? What's the difference in running a division like 500 people in a big enterprise versus building a business with only 10 people and then building it up to, we're about 150 people now. So we've built up, we're global now. And I say it's way, way harder than you realize. Way harder. Some of the challenges you just don't anticipate are going to be there. You don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the support, a whole lot of things that we can talk about. But that's how I got into Ultra Commerce, and pretty much been building for the last 9 years. I'll just close by saying e-commerce really appealed to me because for me, e-commerce is business at its core. How do businesses transact with each other? So straight away, I had a leaning into this that was, I get it, I understand. I start from the principle of what is a business trying to achieve, and then how you apply that technology to deliver that outcome. And I found the space of e-commerce really interesting. It's changed a tremendous amount over that 9-year period, and we can talk a bit about that as we go through this interview. But it's been fascinating. Lots of challenges, but I think I wouldn't change it for the world.
Wow, amazing. And obviously, originally a private cloud computing provider, UltraServe, had they started the foundations behind the scenes of what would ultimately become Ultra Commerce, or did you basically clean sheet of paper say, look, we want to pivot away from just being this cloud hosting provider to actually providing more infrastructure than that around commerce? And you said, look, we're going to build this from the ground up internally.
It's pretty much been built from the ground up internally. But look, there were some foundations there in the UltraServe business. I did have to completely change the business. So we closed down a private cloud data center that the business had and doubled down with AWS. So we've built everything that we've done on AWS. Phase one of the business, and we've really gone through three phases of the business. We're in the third phase now, but phase one of the business, we could see a really significant gap in the market. And this is almost remarkable. Every time I say it, I remind myself just how quickly things have moved. 9 years ago, enterprise businesses were buying their e-commerce licenses as on-prem licenses,
yes,
as you would remember. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest challenges they had, particularly larger enterprises with complex environments, were how do we get this license to work in a cloud setting?
Yep.
So phase one of the business, we could see this significant gap in the market, a significant pain point in the market. Phase one of the business, we built out what we called our Commerce Cloud Orchestration Platform. And it was really built 100% on AWS. So we still do everything that we do on AWS. And it was built really with Hybris in mind. So SAP Commerce, for those of you who don't remember the Hybris days.
Yep.
And the value prop was to go to large enterprise businesses that had bought a Hybris license and offer them the opportunity to allow us to facilitate getting that application running in a public cloud setting with all the public cloud benefits that you would expect. So security and uptime,
auto scale, and
all the things that seem so basic now, but they weren't. And we did very well very quickly. The first 2 years, we went from a team of about 10 people up to a team of about 60 people. We took the business from a small team in Australia. First overseas office that we set up was in Chicago. So we built out in the US. Quickly following that was London. So we had a UK, North American, and Australian kind of operating centers. And the important thing about that was when you're talking to a large enterprise business about running their e-commerce workloads for them, you can't be a small company in Australia saying we'll support you from Australia. You've truly got to have a global operating footprint. So really important that we put that infrastructure in place. And then we secured about 10, 12 really large enterprise business contracts. At our peak, we were running about $10 billion of GMV through that Commerce Cloud platform. And yeah, it was very spiky as well. One of our foundation customers, most of their transactions happened for a couple of days in the month. So they had a big spike. So we had to get very good very quickly at running really complex commerce workloads to a really strict set of SLAs. So pretty much zero downtime. So we used to offer as a standard 5 nines uptime guarantee, and we never used to miss it. And for the businesses that we were working with, if you missed it, it was a big deal. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost revenue with a few minutes of downtime. So we got very good at managing those workloads. And that was phase one of the business. And that's really the foundation from what we built. That team of about 60 people, the fact that we had a US and UK operating center along with Australia, the fact that we were working with some of these really big global brands, and we started to get a reputation for these guys know a lot about commerce. And yeah, we were being pulled into projects that were in distress and rescuing those projects. And I've got many stories about projects that we came into and rescued. But quite quickly, a couple of years into this, I could see the market evolve in a tremendous rate. And I could also see that on-prem licensing model was not going to be here for the long term. So that meant our business model had to evolve and had to evolve very quickly. And that's when we went into phase two of the business, which was talking to some of our partners, talking to some of our customers. They kept saying to me, there's a lack of choice in terms of platform vendors in market who really get what we're trying to do. Why don't you guys have the end-to-end commerce stack? I thought it would be a great idea to embark on that strategy of building out an end-to-end commerce stack and being an alternate to, at the time, the dominant players in market, which were really Hybris, were the leading enterprise play by a long way, as you would remember. ATG was dropping off, WebSphere was dropping off.
It was Magento, really, and Hybris. That was really the two.
In the mid-market. So, it was really building an alternate to those platforms for particularly mid-market to enterprise customers. And that's what we embarked on. And that's really what we got to about 5 years ago.
Wow, what an absolutely crazy journey. And certainly there was a number of SIs that were caught unawares at that time, particularly in Australia, some in New Zealand, but internationally as well, with that massive transition to SaaS. And the way in which they had architected their agencies were based on a managed service provision that over half their revenue was reliant on just keeping the lights on for these businesses from an infrastructure perspective. I remember NetStarter back in the day and a whole lot of other agencies in Australia that no longer exist after their acquisition by Salmat. And Salmat got caught up in that transition too, where they were providing a lot of just keeping the lights on services as opposed to genuine value add for these businesses. And that's where, when SaaS really started to hit its stride at that point, I remember, because I cut my teeth in the Magento ecosystem with a gold partner in New Zealand at that time. And I distinctly remember the first time I ever got my hands on a SaaS platform, and that was the first one that I ever worked with was BigCommerce. And I remember thinking, this changes the game forever. This totally, like, I could do the vast majority of the configuration for a project myself without a developer to get a project ready to go for a client, like in terms of getting all the data loaded into it, getting the configuration, getting the payment gateways up and running, getting all that stuff done. Like, I could do that without a developer, and I could do it in about a day, like 8 hours or less. And the first time I ever did that, just to familiarize myself with the platform, by the end of the day, I went, wow, this is so game changing that I was truly petrified for our Magento side of our business, because that was like 99% of our revenue was servicing Magento clients. And I remember thinking at the time, we are going to have to completely restructure how we operate as an agency. If this is the way the rest of the market goes, and pretty much all software goes this way, we're screwed in our current model. And it was wild, because obviously we had full stack developers, we had backend developers, we had full DevSecOps capabilities, and like half of those capabilities weren't needed in that new world. And it was such, I don't think people today who take SaaS for granted, I don't think they understand how disruptive that business model was for competing vendors, as consultants. Like it disrupted absolutely everything about the industry at that time.
It did indeed. Look, we're going through something similar now, which we'll talk about as we evolve this discussion. But with the kind of evolution of agentic commerce and AI, it's changing the world almost to a larger degree than the change that you've just referred there with the move from on-prem to SaaS. But yeah, it did. And many businesses either had to evolve very quickly or they didn't survive.
Yeah.
And we're going through something very similar now. I think there's a lot of vendors or agencies or SIs that are having to anticipate where the market's going and evolve very quickly now, or their future is in question. And yeah, that for me is one of the most exciting parts of running Ultra Commerce and the industry that we all work in here, the industry of e-commerce, because it does evolve very fast. I used to say to people, an ERP implementation was always very complex in a large enterprise business. But if the ERP had challenges, it was internally focused challenges. It was inconvenient for the internal staff, the finance team and other people that use the ERP. When you implement as you know very well, Jason, when you implement e-commerce for a business of any size and it doesn't go well, it impacts their trade directly. It impacts their customers. It impacts the experience people have of that business. So there's an analogy with media. When I was with Fox, when we had to get a program to air, there was nowhere to hide. You had to get a program to air. It was live. It had to go at a certain time.
Yep.
It had to be seamless. Any mistake was very visible, and you'd get immediate feedback. Same with e-commerce. You launch a site for a customer, their customers experience it the first hour that you've launched that site, and issues are visible straight away. They turn up in revenue results. They turn up in customer sat. So it's a very exciting industry to be part of, but very accountable industry as well. Very accountable industry and unforgiving in many ways. You would remember many years ago the amount of failed e-commerce projects that were happening globally.
Yep.
There were more projects that were suboptimal outcomes than they were really great outcomes. I think that's a lot of that has changed now.
Yep.
There's a level of expectation that is so much higher now than it was 6-7 years ago. Just there's a certain level of expectation that you just have to meet. And then on top of that, it becomes the value add. But it's a fascinating industry for sure.
It is, and the only other parallel that I can draw from a pattern recognition perspective over the last 26 years of being in this space is the advent of mobile. Like, yes, AI is going to be transformative. Agentic is absolutely going to completely change the paradigm of how commerce works. How and exactly how that's going to flesh out and where it's going to land and where the transaction is going to take place, I think is open for debate, but we know it's coming. We know it's disruptive. We know its standards are starting to be formed, the Onyx exchange, and there's some standards starting to come to the fore now that I've always said that until you have standards, you will never have you'll have fads, but you'll never have a truly big change in a trend until you have standards. It's just going back to the beta or VHS debate. Oftentimes the best technology doesn't win, but the standard that wins dictates what happens in the market. And because VHS became the bigger standard, and arguably it was a worse standard than beta, but because it became the global standard, it won in the market. And I think we're seeing a lot of same things happen today. But if I look back to mobile, and I remember the very first time I picked up a high-end Nokia phone that my friend had bought, and it had the special WAP browser. It had the special Nokia-specific browser that worked with an LCD screen. It worked over the internet. I remember thinking at that time, this is a really crap experience, but this changes the game forever. This right here, what I'm holding in my hand, this is as bad as it's ever going to get. And it's just like AI today. And it was the same when the first iPhone 3G came out, and I remember holding it. I remember thinking, this is... because I had the BlackBerry Pearl and I had some of the older smartphones, but I remember the first time I ever picked up the iPhone, and I remember playing with the interface, the touchscreen interface, and I remember thinking, this is a step change. This technology will absolutely change the way we do things in the digital world forever. and it proved to be true. And then we started with M.dot sites, and so when I think back of these step changes that have happened in our industry, I think of SaaS, I think of mobile, I think there's a few different waypoints along the way that kind of give us an idea of just how disruptive AI agentic commerce are going to be to our industry. And I think we faced challenges like this before, and those of us that are willing to embrace that as opposed to just tolerate it, those of us that want to actually embrace it and be on the leading edge of this stuff, I think we stand a pretty damn good chance of coming out the other side of it and being pretty relevant yet again. You only become irrelevant if you can't adapt and you can't adjust and you can't leverage these new technologies.
You think about if you were looking at the way the market was covered by e-commerce vendors 10 years ago, fast forward 5 years, that coverage looked completely different. The vendors had disappeared or they'd retired their offerings. A group of new vendors had emerged. I suspect that in 5 years' time, we're going to have a completely different landscape in terms of e-commerce vendors than there is today. And the exciting thing is that's a blank piece of paper for all platforms. There's going to be some winners. There's going to be some new emerging technology platforms that we don't know about today. And there's going to be some platforms that don't make it. And that's the world we live in today. And that's the exciting thing. And I think go back to your comments around SaaS and the emergence of SaaS and how it changed the way that e-commerce works. I think Shopify really led the way here. It created a market that wasn't there. Shopify did. So it was game changing that you could literally, as a non-technical person, get your small business transactional online within hours, certainly within a day.
Yeah.
And that's with a non-technical person doing that. I'm talking very small business here, but it created a market where that small business would not have become e-commerce kind of focused if it wasn't enabled by a platform like Shopify. And it did completely change the market. And that market's continued to evolve, by the way. But the fact that businesses could get online transactional really efficiently meant that the emergence of e-commerce just accelerated. That evolution, though, those SaaS platforms like Shopify, like BigCommerce, have evolved significantly. Both of those businesses had a app store type strategy, which is get up and running, and then for the extra capability that you need, go to our app store and add technology components in. And that worked very well. And by the way, take our payment gateway as well in Shopify's case. And that worked very well. But what happened is quite quickly, it became obvious that the cost of ownership was way more significant than businesses had anticipated. So I know businesses that got up and running on Shopify that had a budget of $2,000 a month and ended up spending $20,000 a month because they'd put all these apps into their stack from the Shopify store, and they didn't know how to get out of that cycle, and they couldn't really afford the $20,000 a month. We work with a lot of our customers that run Shopify, but they run Shopify with our PIM or our OMS or our marketplace integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a really interesting evolution. So we hear about Shopify and BigCommerce. They're really pushing into the enterprise space, a more complex B2B. 90% of the businesses that actually are true enterprise businesses that use Shopify or BigCommerce use other technology, other third-party technology to make that stack work efficiently, as you would well know. So the market's kind of adapted and evolved, and you can run as a very large business now, Shopify as your core commerce, along with a third-party PIM, channel manager, order management capability for fulfillment. You can run at real scale. But Shopify is one component of your tech stack, of the tech stack. And that's been an interesting evolution as well, which we've rode the journey on.
And the other pattern that I'm seeing repeat itself right now, literally as we speak, and has done at an accelerated rate since COVID primarily, is we saw over the last 15 years, we saw a radical consolidation in retail e-commerce platforms. I remember even when we made the switch as an agency to working primarily with Magento to primarily working with BigCommerce, and at that time, the three neck and neck platforms that were just duking it out at that time, at least in the ANZ region, were BigCommerce, Volusion, and Shopify. Those were the three retail SaaS e-commerce platforms that were duking it out for sort of market share. Now, obviously, in hindsight, Shopify kicked everyone's ass and Volusion disappeared, and BigCommerce is definitely struggling. If not, whether it's going to be around in its current guise in another year or so, time will tell.
Yeah.
But we saw radical consolidation in the retail e-commerce platform space over the span of 5 to 10 years, to where now it's primarily a two-horse race. If you want a pure SaaS platform and you want almost unlimited scale at some sort of a reasonable cost, you're probably going to go Shopify. If you want self-hosted, whatever, then you're probably going to run WooCommerce, right? And so they, from a market share perspective, from a number of sites hosted perspective, they are the two absolute Goliaths in the retail e-commerce space. But that level of consolidation has yet to occur in the B2B e-commerce space. And we still have, today, there are like 30 to 40 either solely B2B or heavy B2B focused e-commerce platforms out there. And I'm starting to see behind the scenes the signs of distress, competitive distress, like we saw back in the day when Shopify started to just kill almost everybody else that was a competitor, started to wipe them out. We're starting to see those similar signs of distress across the rest of the B2B ecosystem. And I find that really interesting. And I'm getting more business now from B2B e-commerce platform vendors who are saying the way buyers are buying platforms today is totally different. It's totally changed just in the last few years. They're coming to us way more educated before we even have a sniff at talking to them. Half the decision's already been made before we even get a chance to sit at the table and have a conversation with them. They're doing a lot more research online themselves, not only through Google, but through their informal networks and through the large language model platforms today. So, and there's less reliance on the waves and the quadrants than there used to be. Maybe to get on someone's radar, they might look at a wave or a quadrant, but they're doing a lot more research before they reach out to an 8 to get a platform demo or have a sales discussion. So we're seeing the same disruptive forces at play in the B2B e-commerce world as we watched happen before in the B2C and D2C e-commerce world. And I think that's a really interesting parallel to watch emerge.
I think it is. Look, I think there's two things to say about B2B. You know this incredibly well, so I'm telling you things. But B2B, obviously, there's two components. You've got the feature set that you need to serve a B2B use case. And that feature set has a whole lot of additional features versus a B2C case. Yeah, advanced quoting, more complex fulfillment rules,
price lists, restricted catalogs, all
product configurators, price modifiers, or the whole stack of things that's it. So that's your feature set. But I think in our analysis, most platforms have a comparable feature set. Yep. So this is interesting. When you look at feature to feature, if you were doing the old fashioned, we're just going to basically look at 5 different vendors and we're going to compare them feature by feature. They're almost the same.
Yeah.
So you don't actually win on a feature differentiation usually.
Yeah.
What I think is the most complicated part of B2B, and actually this is converged somewhat with B2C with the advent of different channels, marketplaces, etc., which is it's the data flows that make a B2B platform a success or a B2B implementation a success or a failure. It's the data flows. So having the features and having the capability that you can offer a B2B business tick, and I can get that from a whole set of different vendors. But can that vendor help me manage my data flows? And you know what I'm talking about, the product data. How do I get the product data organized? How do I get the product data into the right systems? How do I get the syncs working in real time? Yeah, I was talking to a business, I probably talked to 5 or 6 customers or prospective customers a week. And I was talking to a business last week, and this is a great example of, this is more a B2C business, but it leans into what we're talking about on B2B. They use Shopify. No, their site looks great. They use Shopify. They're doing about 20,000 orders a month. So not huge, but not a really small business. And their challenge is how their inventory is keeping their inventory synced in real time. What was happening is they were starting to sell at a rate that they hadn't anticipated, and they ended up selling items that they didn't have in inventory, and they couldn't fulfill in the expected timeframes. And therefore, they were disappointing customers. Fulfillment times were blowing out. keeping track of all the inventory movements was proving very difficult. And it was becoming a bit of a mess, quite frankly. And we talked to them about potentially adding an order management capability into their stack to manage all that through. But again, it starts and stops with the data flow. It's, how do I make sure that my inventory is updated and accurate at all times? One of our largest customers here in Australia, they have a guaranteed 2-hour delivery promise. If they don't meet that 2-hour delivery promise, the customer doesn't pay. So you can imagine this business has to there's no room for failure here. One, their uptime has to be flawless. Secondly, when a customer comes in and they look at a product and they purchase a product, the back-end systems need to be in seamlessly. Where is that inventory? What's the least cost routing? How can I guarantee it there in 2 hours? If I can't, let's make sure we don't make that promise. There's a whole lot of complexity that sits in the background, which is really data related. And I think that's what I'm saying in B2B businesses. In all the projects that I've seen succeed and be great successes, it's managing all those data flows and starting with that kind of planning. The feature set in terms of B2B feature set almost is secondary from my perspective, because there's so many platforms that have the feature set that a B2B business needs. Now, I don't know if you agree with that, Jason, but that's our research.
And I think that leads nicely into some of the acquisitions that you've made, whether it be Slap, Omnify, Commerce3, but I want to focus in a little bit on Commerce3 because I know Greg and Frank very well. I've known them for many years, all the way from the Flow days through to the Fusion Factory days, through to the Commerce3 days, and obviously you acquired Commerce3 in the end. And I learned early on, really from them, especially from the Flow days, just how mission critical system integration, but more importantly, data integration is to e-commerce. And even in the early days, it was extremely rare if we had a project that didn't have system integration as a core component of the project. Like, it was extremely rare. Sure, occasionally you had very small businesses that maybe would do everything by manually uploading and downloading CSVs or something like that. Even something as simple as automatically extracting a CSV, dumping it onto an SFTP server, and then grabbing it into another system. Like, even that level of rudimentary level of data integration and data automation, that was always important in e-commerce. But I think today it is a mission critical component of, there's not a single project that I help scope today and haven't done for the last 15 years that didn't have a massive amount of system and data integration as part of the project. In fact, in many cases, the system and data integration component of the project is the most time consuming and the most costly part of the entire project. It's not building the storefront. It's not configuring the platform. It's not the initial data migration to get the platform up and running. It is the operational aspects of continuous system integration and continuous data integration that makes or breaks the success of those projects.
100%. 100%. You've just said in a better way what I was trying to get at in terms of the B2B success factors on a project. Having the systems all talking to each other, having the data moving seamlessly, having it sync in real time is the most important thing for the success of most e-commerce projects today. And that becomes even more important as you get larger product catalogs, more systems that you've got to integrate into.
More customer data.
100%. So it just becomes the most fundamental success factor of pretty much any commerce project. And this is true in B2C as well now, because very few B2C businesses sell through to their bricks and mortar store and through their own e-commerce store. Pretty much every B2C business now will sell on a third-party marketplace, or they'll sell on some other channels. So again, that's managing all that product data, all that inventory information, all those flows, and making sure they're syncing. Because if you're selling on, let's say, 5 different channels, as well as your e-commerce store, as well as in your bricks and mortar store, everything's got to be syncing real time. Otherwise, you're going to be selling things that you can't fulfill, selling things that aren't in inventory, getting your pricing wrong. How do you keep all that pricing synced and updated at real time? How do you run promotions when you need to in certain channels that you don't run on other channels? It becomes incredibly complicated. And that's really, you talked about we'll go back to Ultra Commerce's journey. When we were building out, I talked about phase 1, and then we were moving into phase 2. And how we were building out our end-to-end stack, I looked through every decision we were making through a build, partner, buy lens. Building software often is very expensive and takes a long time. Often the timeframes blow out, etc. Partnering works, but you're not in control of your own destiny, often in partnering. Buy-in has some challenges, but we found on 2 or 3 occasions, it was the best option we had to fast-track our product roadmap. So the first acquisition we made, as you rightly say, was a business out of Boston called Slatwall Commerce. We already had our commerce platform and we were winning businesses with this commerce platform, but we had a really complex product roadmap ahead in terms of features we were building out, other capabilities we were building out on our product roadmap. I came across the Slatwall Commerce team and their business, and it just looked like a perfect fit for me in terms of a lot of what they already had built, we had on our roadmap. So it very much was a product synergy acquisition there. There were some customers that we acquired as well, but it was very much a product synergy. How do we fast track that product roadmap? Exactly the same happened with the Omnify transaction. When we bought Omnify, was a very small business here in Australia, a marketplace vendor, as you may know. We had a marketplace capability in our UltraCommerce stack, and we had a couple of customers running that marketplace capability. But the amount of inbound that we were getting around marketplaces, businesses wanting to run a marketplace, I had to prioritize on our product roadmap what we were doing around marketplace. Omnify had some great tech. They had some really good people in the business. So it just made sense. Let's acquire that business. Let's, again, a product synergy acquisition. And the same on Chemistry, but Chemistry was slightly different. Chemistry, I really admired what Frank was doing with Chemistry for many years. They took a lead position here in Australia. They were known as the PIM for retail.
System integration guys and the PIM guys.
They were known for it, and they were doing incredibly well. There weren't many retail businesses or B2C businesses in Australia that weren't using Chemistry in some form or another.
I agree.
So I really admired.
I actually implemented it when I was still working in retail as an employee. The first PIM we ever implemented at HealthPost was Chemistry.
And it's a good PIM. It's a good PIM. And so I admired what they were doing. I could see their evolution as well when they partnered with Flow. They bought an OMS capability. They expanded into the Europe region. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh, yeah.
But some of this becomes scaling a business, both on the product side and geographically, is very difficult. And I think, the Chemistry business kind of ran into some challenges as they were scaling out that business in all candidness. And therefore, I could see some of the challenges they were running into and actually opened a discussion that said, for us, one of the most important things, one, you've got some great customers, some amazing customers here in Australia, particularly in Australia, but a couple of global customers as well. So there was a lot of value in that for us. But secondly, your PIM and OMS capability, even though we have a PIM and OMS, I could see a lot of product roadmap synergy benefits there as well. So that was another one that made a lot of sense for us, but it was twofold. One was the customer synergy benefit. So some of the customers that Chemistry had coming onto the UltraCommerce platform was really great. We could offer them a lot more in terms of our global support structure, some deeper kind of technology teams, a whole lot of things that we could bring to the table as UltraCommerce. And we've done that with those customers and then giving them access to our broader product roadmap as well and our product portfolio. And then the other thing was actually bringing the PIM and OMS into our product portfolio. So now what we have in UltraCommerce is really 3 parts of our business. If I could just round this out by talking about that. So we have what we call Shop Essentials, which is our core commerce platform. The second part we call Intelligent Commerce. That's our PIM, OMS, and Marketplace platform and Channel Manager that sits in what we call Intelligent Commerce. And the third one, which is the evolving one, but evolving very quickly, and we've doubled down in this space, is our Agentic Commerce solution. So they're the 3 components that people ask me, are you still looking to acquire different businesses? I'm saying no. I actually don't see a need to acquire additional businesses at this point in time. Now, who knows what's going to pop up, but I don't see any need at the point in time, certainly from a product perspective. Maybe customer scale, etc. maybe. But that's what we have today. And now it's about execution against each of those. And we've been very fortunate. We've got some really large businesses that are now running on our platforms. we've expanded quite significantly in Europe with some large customers in Europe. US, at the moment, we're probably about 40% of our business in North America, 20-30% in Europe, and the balance in Australia. So we're quite well spread across those three regions as well. But the most exciting thing for us now is not only running our core business, that core commerce platform and the intelligent commerce portfolio, but the emergence of agentic commerce we see as the most exciting thing that's happened in my 9 years being in this industry, and the opportunity it creates for vendors like us, I think, is tremendous.
It is. It is the most transformational technology that I've seen, if not ever, then certainly in a very long time in the commerce world. And yeah, I'm seeing specifically, I actually think agentic commerce is going to be more disruptive in the short to medium term in the B2B world than it is going to be in the B2C,
I think
D2C
so.
world. And one of the reasons I think that is I think that there's still I can't imagine my wife, for example, I can't imagine her jumping into ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is and executing a transaction through that. I just can't. She likes to go to the websites of a fashion brand, for example. She likes to browse. She likes to be inspired. She likes to look at the different products. She likes to see the product recommendations. She likes to see the styling. She likes to see the sizing guide. There's just elements of that really hyper interactive website experience, the shopping experience than the buying experience that is so personal, it's so emotional, it's inspirational, it's aspirational. There are some transactional purchases that happen in retail e-commerce, but so much of retail e-commerce is about the shopping experience, not just the buying experience, that we're trying to keep people on our retail websites longer, not less. Whereas in B2B, oftentimes it's about how quick can we get them into the experience, get them what they need, and get them out of the experience. And so the whole KPI set around what does a really good B2B experience look like is so different to what you could say a really good retail e-commerce experience look like. I think agentic, the combination of conversational AI mixed with multimodal AI is so disruptive to the way B2Bs do business today. It's pretty exciting. We're already starting to see some pretty amazing tech emerge. But my question to you is, did you always have, right from day dot, a focus on B2B, or did that come laterally? Did you see the importance of B2B capabilities in the platform really early on, or was that an epiphany that came later?
Phase one of our business, we were running really complex commerce workloads at scale. And what that meant is we were able to deal with real commerce complexity very early on in our journey, which lent us very naturally into the space of B2B, which had more complexity, was underserved, and which we had a solution for. So our feature sets were ahead of many other platforms. And look, we tried to find, whether we were right or wrong on this, we tried to find a middle ground between the Shopify BigCommerce SaaS, you get what you get, and the commerce tools, build whatever you want with our tools. We tried to find a middle ground there whereby there's enough productized here, but you can extend and get the benefits of customization around our platform. So you get the best of both worlds. That was our
lots of PBCs, but it's not going to cost you $1 million for your build.
That was our value prop. B2B businesses, however, are less mature, or generally. I probably shouldn't say that now, because I think B2B businesses are catching up very quickly, but generally they were less mature. When you go to a B2C business, they know e-commerce more, they've got a deeper team, they've got more technology expertise. B2B businesses often went, and they often underestimated the complexity of implementing commerce. And that complexity started with the data, all the capability they wanted. So we did lean into B2B. The first thing we did was lean into B2B because we could see the complexity, we could see it was underserved, and we could see that we had a natural solution to that, and we could run that at scale. However, it became a really tough market to crack, And some of that was on us, and some of that was on the way we went to market. A lot of how we've expanded the business and got to where we are today was to hedge against just being a B2B platform. I felt if we were just a B2B platform, even with our agentic commerce play now, we would have really struggled to continue to grow at the rate we have. Marketplace particularly, the OMS particularly, has given us a lot more growth opportunity. And interestingly, that can apply into B2B in a really robust way as well. and then the agentic space. I think you're right, but I think agentic will be adopted. It feels very much, every customer I talk to, the execs in every business have been asked by their board, what are you doing around AI? What's your strategy for AI? And they're saying to us, what do you have around AI? We want to be doing something in this space. And I think at the moment, it looks like B2C businesses are going to lead the way again with agentic AI, maybe not with years in advance, but they're going to lead the space. They're all asking, what can you deliver in terms of your agentic commerce platform? Can we be one of the first movers on this platform? We've got to be shown that we're doing something. They're already seeing, to a degree, traffic drop-offs and more searches coming through the LLMs. So that is just happening. And it's happening, I think, at a rate of knots that we're all underestimating.
Even my own services website is the same. Even my own website. It's crazy how I look through Clarity now and I look at the sources and how rapidly LLMs have become one of the biggest sources of traffic. It's wild, actually.
100%. I've got two teenagers. They're not teenagers now. They're at uni children, and they don't use Google in the same way that I used to 10 years ago. They've got their 4 LLM apps on their laptop, and that's what they use. And my son particularly, he'll use one for his coding, he'll use one for searching, he'll use one for, he's doing a physics degree for his physics. Each LLM has its strengths, and it's just a natural thing for people to be using now. Sorry, I've jumped away from your B2B question, but did I answer that? Because I know B2B is a space that you feel very passionate about, but that's how we started in B2B, why we started in B2B. But we did run into, we've got some really great customers running B2B, but it's a tough market to crack.
Oh, yeah.
Really tough market to crack.
Yeah, I think, your story around how and why you needed to support those complex use cases in the early days of really providing infrastructure for the likes of big Magento, Hybris, Magento and Hybris commerce customers. It's a very similar story to Commerce Tools, I had Dirk on the podcast, and because they were working very heavily with Hybris projects before they ever started Commerce Tools, and that's where they cut their teeth. Most of the Commerce Tools team had a background with Hybris, and even big German-based platforms, even pre-Hybris. And so he said, look, what we saw was an opportunity at that time to effectively recreate a Hybris type of capability, but in a SaaS model. And that's what they saw. And that's why they built Commerce Tools in the first place. Now, of course, it could be argued that what they built was a toolkit, not an actual platform, but it's semantics probably in some respects. But certainly the genesis of Commerce Tools has a lot of parallels with you guys, in the sense that you guys had to build the infrastructure for large at-scale businesses. A lot of Hybris customers were B2Bs. Like there was a lot of B2B enterprises running Hybris at the time. I remember back in the day when Hybris really started to hit Australia for the first time, and there were no Hybris projects being implemented that were under $1 million. They just didn't exist.
100%. Look, we do. I've got to say a call out to Commerce Tools, because I think they've done an amazing job, and I think they've executed incredibly well. Yes, they've run into some challenges now, but they've done a great job taking that place of Hybris in the market. They really did. They filled that gap that was created when Hybris was acquired by SAP, and SAP haven't taken commerce as seriously as a standalone platform like Hybris. So they've done an amazing job. But they are more a tool set from our perspective than they are a SaaS platform. They're not just go and buy a subscription to their platform and then implement it. It's a lot more complicated than that. But I get your point, and I think their strategy was really sound. They'll be evolving as we are now. They've got a lot bigger than we are into the space of agentic. And that's where the new world is now. And it's going to be really interesting to see how each platform kind of adapts. And just to jump, and I know we're probably running out of time here a bit, Jason. We've taken an approach with agentic commerce, which is quite different, we think, to the other platforms, which is where we're technology agnostic, number one. What that means is our agentic commerce platform, we will get access to our merchants' APIs. We'll take the product feed that they want to expose to AI agents. We will enrich that product data for geo, so it's more searchable and usable by AI agents. This is all happening automatically. We will then allow, and we've got UAP and ACP those protocols both implemented in our platform. We'll allow then the whole buyer journey, obviously with search, select, checkout, payment, and then we will pass the order back into the merchant, into their OMS or ERP or however they fulfill. And our value prop is really allow the customer, the merchant or our customer ultimately doesn't need to do anything with their tech stack. Either side. We will take the API, we'll integrate into either side. So they pass the products to us that they want to surface to AI agents, and the next thing they see are orders that have been confirmed and paid for that are passed back into their fulfillment engine. So that's really what we've created. Launched that product. We've spent probably about 6 months now building that product out, using a lot of the tech that we were using anyway inside our stack. And we pretty much just launched that. We're running into the challenge that I think everyone's running into, which is getting the merchant account set up with OpenAI and Google. But anyway, that's a timing issue. That's not so much a fundamental issue. And like I said, our big value prop is it's technology agnostic. A merchant doesn't need to touch their existing stacks, and we can enable them for agentic commerce in a frictionless way.
And are you gonna join up with Onyx as well? So the Order Network Exchange, and
we haven't. No, I've been watching that with interest. I admire, the people involved in that. We haven't considered that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think they're trying to tackle what has been an age-old problem in the commerce world, and I think bringing standards to data flows, particularly around orders, and there's always been challenges that have been dealt with in middleware around this. That's historically how this has all been managed. But look, I think anybody who's trying to bring some standardization to the industry is probably doing a good thing. It remains to be seen whether they can get enough traction to get everybody on board with that, the major vendors on board with that, or do they turn into another sort of mock alliance sort of scenario? I hope not, because I think that the mock alliance, whilst it may have had a place in the industry when they first started, my sense and my take is that they kind of lost their way a little bit and got too heavy into the area of evangelism and really architectural rigidity. And I think that doesn't serve the industry well. And I think that's the struggle that they ran into, because not every business is the same. And therefore, not every architecture can work the same for every business.
And look, I see you comment on this. I smile often when I see some of your commentary around some of the buzzwords around composable and Mac architecture, etc. Because I have a philosophy inside Ultra Commerce, and I say this every day to our team: we're a customer first. So the check that we always apply to everything we're doing is test it with our customers. Does it work for our customers? Is it going to be scalable for our customers? Our whole product roadmap is driven by what our customers are asking us for. And I think you can forget that somewhere. I know it sounds obvious, but you can sometimes forget that and think about the theoretical or kind of the concept.
Or just tech for the sake of tech.
Exactly. And I said to you right at the start of this podcast, I'm a business guy by background. I'm not the tech person in our business. And that just gives me a discipline that I think is really important, which is my first question is always, what is the business trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? And the second then is, how do we apply our technology to that problem? Not the other way around. And how many tech companies are pushing their technology to solve problems that actually don't exist?
Yes.
Many.
Yes, absolutely. And let's be fair, there's a lot of technical people in the industry, both on the vendor side and the SI side, that they're technical. And so therefore they want to scratch the technical itch, regardless of whether that is relevant or not to a broad enough set of customers to be viable long-term. And we're seeing that play out today. We're seeing consolidation start to happen not only in the SI space, we're starting to see consolidation happen in the platform vendor space because of that approach in some instances. I think agentic is just going to exacerbate that. And I think what that's going to happen is it's going to force a lot of vendors to get real with themselves and to get real with the market about what they can and cannot do and about what value they actually bring.
There'll be a wave of consolidation, Jason, in that's my view. I'm talking in terms of platform vendors, because there's so many platform vendors that can't scale any more than where they are today for a whole combination of different reasons. And what do you do in that situation? You either fail as a business, or you become a zombie business, or you look for acquisition opportunities, or you consolidate up. And these businesses often have great tech, great people, and some good customers. And It's not that they're badly ran businesses or their tech isn't good or the people aren't good. They often have all of those ingredients. It's just break it. I said to you, the challenge we found in the B2B space was, how do you truly scale up? Every project took us a long time to win. Every project implementation took a long time, longer than we estimated to get working, often because of the underestimation of the complexity of the environment that we were working within, and the lack of depth of maybe technical team on the B2B customer side. So yeah, it's hard to scale that business model.
Yep.
You can do it via a pure SaaS model, but then often you're not solving all the challenges that a B2B business needs to be solved. And you do it via a traditional software model, and it's hard to scale at speed.
Yes.
So,
I couldn't agree more. And do you guys, as of today, March, whatever, 2026, do you do most of the implementations of your software yourself, or do you have a really good, strong SI network of partners that do most of your implementations, or is it a split?
it's a split, but no, 80% implementations that we do ourselves. It's not, we're trying hard to move away from that. So some of the larger businesses that we've sold our platform to and we're working with, they almost insisted that we do the implementation. They wanted the party who built the platform, who knows the tech inside out, to be the implementation partner at the same time. To win those deals, we've actually agreed to do it. Implementation. We did, and that's okay because it allows you to build out some product capability at the same time. And you're working with big global businesses. But we've probably got about 10 partners that understand our tech, have been onboarded onto our tech. A few have completed projects. Yeah, I'd love to be saying to you, we've got the opposite. We've got an 80-20 split, i.e. 80% of our implementations are partners, 20% are ours. It's the other way at the moment.
Yeah.
We hope that's going to change, and we are working to change that. That's part of our strategy, as every commerce vendor does. Again, it's really hard to scale. We don't want to be a professional services house.
No.
We don't want hundreds and hundreds of people
or
doing...
Or worse, a managed services house on top.
Yeah, indeed. So we do, and we've got some great partners who have shown a willingness to invest and work with us on some projects. So.
I love it. I love it. Listen, been a fabulous conversation. If you could sprinkle fairy dust on the e-commerce industry and change one thing about it at the snap of your fingers, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked, as we've gone through this podcast, the amount of change that's happening right in front of us. Almost it feels every year something changes dramatically. And I think that is what's happening today as we speak. I think there's a lot of fragmentation across e-commerce. Yeah, the amount of different platforms and technology that are out there that different businesses are implementing. I suspect agentic commerce is going to bring a lot of that together. You're going to get some vendors who are really good at enabling agentic commerce and life cycling existing tech that businesses have. You don't have to rip that out. If you remember the days where the first question you were talking to a customer about was replacing what they had today, ripping what they have today out and replacing it with new tech. That world has changed. Yeah, it's a lot more now. Businesses' first reaction is, can I use what I have today, enhance what I have today, add something to it, make it do what it does? And agentic just leans into that thesis in a big way. Keep what you have today. If it's working, you don't need to replace that. Now let's talk about, and ultimately, agentic is like a super PIM. In a way, as you may know, it really
almost a super MDM in a way.
Yeah, indeed. And then with the fulfillment capability. So I don't know if I've got a great answer for you in terms of that magic dust. I just think, I think the more our industry works together on some of the bigger challenges, I think the better. It is a very competitive industry, though. I'm just super excited about what lies ahead. The world of agentic, I think, is just transformational. If we were talking in 2 years' time, I think we would look back and say, wow, what has happened there? That was bigger than the SaaS, the advent of SaaS, and the adoption,
and bigger than mobile,
and bigger than mobile and marketplaces, etc. This has just evolved at a rate. And look at it now. As the major analysts are predicting $5 trillion worth of transactional volume through agentic in the next 3 years. So, if it's that big, that quickly, we're in for
even if it's half as big as they project.
We're in for a great ride, and you'll be at the forefront of that, Jason. We
both will. And look, that's one of the things I genuinely love about this industry is for 26 years I've never gotten bored, and for 26 years I've woken up every single day excited to do what I do and excited to be a part of this industry and feel. And I've always felt lucky and privileged and blessed to be a part of this industry. And it's a very inclusive industry. We've got all colors and genders and races and backgrounds in this industry. You don't have to come from a specific background to be successful in this industry. You have to be hungry, you have to be humble, and you have to be willing to learn. And I think if you've got those three attributes, you'll do very well in the commerce space. And I try to continue to grow those attributes in myself and to try to stay humble, to stay hungry, to have that childlike curiosity that I did 26 years ago when I started in this industry. I was just insanely curious about how everything in this industry worked back in the day. And I try to just continue to culture that sense of curiosity even today. That's what keeps me excited and exploring new things and playing with Lovable and Replit and just doing things that, get me back into the learning mode again and make sure that I'm always in that learning mode, because I think we're all like, anybody that says that they know exactly how this whole AI or agentic thing is going to shake out over the next 3 years, I think they're either lying to you or they're delusional. And so I think we just have to be ultra, to use one of your words, ultra flexible in how this may turn out, because some of the standards of today, they might not be around in 12 months time. It may be a new standard that replaces it, and we got to be ready for that. So very exciting times. Now's my chance to flip the script, though. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Mr. Matthew Hyland from Ultra Commerce, what is your question for me today?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. My question to you today is, with all the different vendors and stakeholders that you talk to in the B2B space, what do you see as the number one challenge that commerce vendors have serving the B2B segment, or in fact B2B businesses have working with commerce vendors?
I think the most disruptive thing happening right now that I don't think anybody has a perfect end-to-end answer for yet. There are some technologies nibbling around the edges and plugging some of the gaps, but no one has a complete end-to-end solution yet, is for the formerly communication-only B2B channels like email, Slack, Teams, WhatsApp. There is still a tremendous amount of communication. There's still a tremendous amount of business. There's still a tremendous amount of queries that happen through those channels between buyers and sellers. They'll send an email through with a PDF of an order attached, or they'll send a WhatsApp message to their account manager and say, hey, do you have this thing in stock? What's my price on it? If I buy this many, how quick can you get it to me? There's still, I think we're going to see those 3 or 4 channels turned into full-blown headless commerce channels, managed agentic commerce. They're going to be full-blown headless commerce channels within the next 12 to 18 months. They are just, there's already some platforms already have what they call their AI sales agent, where you can upload a PDF of a PO to the website of the commerce website, and then it'll populate the cart or whatever it is. But I think because you can search via those channels, they've all got APIs, so we can connect those channels. When we think about the combination of multimodal AI combined with conversational AI, and those two combined together, I should be able to upload a quote request to WhatsApp and have that intercepted electronically and then injected into the commerce system, just as if I logged into the portal and raised a quote request through the portal. All that same stuff, as of today, it requires a tremendous amount of behavioral change by the customer to use a modern portal experience. Whereas there's a lot of buyers that they can't change their behavior because they're, I don't know, making a purchase from a job site or something like that. There's certain scenarios where they can't change their behavior no matter how good your portal tech is. They'll never use it. And so they want to continue to use those traditional communication channels that they have with their supplier, but they want to get the benefit of that automated commerce tooling. And so does the supplier. The supplier wants to get great ROI out of their commerce investments. But the reality is, if they have to force all their customers to change their behavior to get ROI, then it's probably a fool's errand. And so I think that is where the biggest opportunity lies as of today. Now, that's going to change as agentic procurement hits platforms like Jagger and Coupa and Ariba and all the e-procurement platforms. Once they become fully agentic first, then that's going to change the game even further. But I think in the short to medium term, those traditional belly sales cycles that are mediated by these electronic communication channels, that's got to change. That distinction between communication versus commerce, that barrier has to completely go away. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities over the next 12 to 24 months.
Very good. Great answer. I think what you've just summed up, though, is, again, a bit of a theme that we've talked about over the last hour or so, which is it isn't just the tech, it's the actual business processes that are as important to achieving an outcome as anything. Yeah, I agree with your sentiment completely.
Listen, this has been a fabulous conversation. I super appreciate your generosity of time with me today, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. And hopefully, at some point, I'll see you down here in Mexico, and we can hang out together and have a couple of margaritas and a barbecue together. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.